Welcome to the Raising Values podcast, where the traditional family talks. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can support the Raising Values podcast through Patreon. Phil and Gillian are behind the mic, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Raising Values.
Good morning, everybody. Or good day, or good evening, or whatever.
I remember
whatever time you're listening to this.
I remember when we first started doing this episode, it was always like the last second, who's going to actually intro? And now we've fallen into this interesting little routine where I say, welcome back, and you say good morning, and then we just go. Totally by accident.
Maybe the awkwardness has worn off.
Well, no, we're still awkward.
I said that and I was like, no, the awkwardness is still there. But good morning. It is, it's been a crazy week for us. So, and I'm still not feeling 100%. I started feeling bad last Sunday, and I kind of mentioned that during the show. And then I just went downhill from there, and I'm still not feeling 100. So,
and Francine, the wind and everything from Francine is probably responsible for a lot of my congestion. It probably didn't help yours either.
Mine's from booger eaters at school.
Oh, booger eaters.
Booger eaters. That's what my sickness is from. Actually, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the podcast, but this week, anything that I could sanitize and soak in Lysol, I did. Like buckets. I had buckets up by my sink in my classroom just full of manipulatives that the kids play with. One reason is because I'm sitting here and I have my 4-year-old class in there, and he's got the bucket of, they call them plus blocks or whatever, it doesn't matter. And he sneezes twice into the bucket. And I'm just like, oh God. Hence why I don't feel very good. Actually, I've done pretty good. So when I started back at school, I remember being sick from like mid-August all the way through February. I remember going to prepper camp and being very sick that year.
Was that the year that you and I both went to prepper camp with a sinus infection? Yeah.
I don't know if you had it. Oh, I guess you did. But I can remember walking down to, there's a lady there who, she teaches a class. It's kind of like a medicinal apothecary, herbal remedy kind of booth that she runs, and I was hitting her up every day. I was like, what else do you have? What else do you have? I've got to feel better. I can't be here and feel like crap. Well, turns out I had COVID that year. So anyway, booger eaters, and everything has been sanitized in my classroom that I can sanitize. Anyway, to today's podcast, because that was what you woke up to listen to today, was why Gillian is sick. We are talking about generational curses and breaking generational curses. And I asked Phil, morning, Joe. I asked Phil if he had any banners or what he was going to talk about, because this came from his list of ideas of topics, which is fine. We have that list.
She won't take credit for it, but I'm pretty sure this was a topic she told me to put on the list, but now she doesn't remember doing that.
I'm out. I know this is bad, but I forgot to turn off the coffee pot, and there's no coffee in the pot. My bad. I'm back. Yeah, so generational curses and all that stuff. So I asked Phil, I was like, did you put any banners up there? And I actually did some research and all that. And I know that I talk about generational curses a lot on this podcast, and this has been good therapy for me. Eddie, when you listen, I'm serious when I commented I needed a therapist. So, hit me up. You've got my number. I probably could use a therapist. We all could. I think therapy is something that used to be taboo when you went to therapy. Like, why are you seeing a therapist? Why do you need to see a therapist? And I maybe this is maybe this will have something to tie into this episode, but I can remember my parents putting all of us, me and my sisters, in therapy at a very young age, very, very young age. I don't know why we were in there from a very young age. I don't know what, like, I can't remember, like, what was happening or what. I don't know. I just remember seeing a lot of therapists when I was a kid, and some of them were a little, a little strange. We actually had one therapist during a family session that got up and said, "I can't help y'all," and walked out. Um, if that needs to be a show. If my sister were listening, she'd be like, "Yeah, I remember that. I hope." But yeah, he literally, no, it was a girl. She sat up in the session. We're all sitting around, and she sets up with her notepad and she goes, "I honestly don't think I can help you. I don't think I can help y'all as a family," and walked out of the room. And we're all sitting there going, "What the hell just happened?" We're that fucked up.
I heard
Anyway,
this story before we got married, and that should have been a sign.
that should have been your sign. You should have walked away. But no, you married for love.
I married the least crazy one in your family by a wide margin.
Maybe so. I think, though, that does kind of tie into the generational curses. But time out before we do all of that. We totally miss doing all of the admin work, all of the things that we should be doing.
I do have banners for the admin work.
Okay. Well, see, I asked if you had banners, and
But that wasn't
I'm
banners
glad
for the episode.
that's okay. I'm glad you have that because we almost forgot. So, merch is out.
The link's in the show description. It's from the Southern Gals.
Yeah. And so one thing that we did get, wow, we're so not prepared for today's show because what I wanted to show you is in the kitchen. And I'm not going to get up again to go run to the kitchen and get them. But you can go to Southern Gals Crafts. No. Yeah. Okay. Always mess that up. I'm sorry, Tiffany.
The link's in the show description.
The link's in the show description for merch. So, like, if you want T-shirts, if you want coffee cups, if you want whatever, koozies, whatever, it's all there. So you can go do that and it's all on the same page. Raising Values and Matter of Facts is all on the same page. I would love, if you're going to prepper camp, I would love to see our shirts out at prepper camp. I know a couple of people have bought things that they're going to wear to prepper camp. I'll be wearing our merchandise throughout the whole time. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I put this in our Signal chat for patrons, is that we got stickers printed. And so we'll be sending y'all your stickers. You know, at one point we did the patches, the MOF patches. We don't have a patch for Raising Values. I don't know if we're going to do that. But we do have stickers that were printed up. So we'll send you stickers. And then the rest of those stickers will be handed out at Prepper Camp. So if you are going to be at Prepper Camp, be sure to stop by our booth and grab some of the stickers. And you can also sign up. I do have this one. You can also sign up for a giveaway at Prepper Camp. Oh, let me cover that. You can't scan that. Sign up for a giveaway at Prepper Camp, and you'll get a shirt if you win. Yeah. Okay. That's the merch. And then the Signal chats, I kind of just spoke on that. We do have a Matter of Facts patron Signal chat. That's been going on for years. It's always a fun time in there.
It gets a little out of hand.
It's so fun that I've muted it. So if you want to talk to me and you're in the Matter of Fact Signal chat, you have to actually @ me so that I'll see the notification.
Or scoot over to the Raising Value Signal chat, which is a little bit more sedate.
Yes. So we do have a Raising Value Signal chat, which doesn't talk about so much prepping, guns, and politics, but more things that we talk about on this show. And that's thanks to one of our listeners that said, why don't we have a Raising Value Signal chat? And then it was created. So yeah, thanks for that. All right. So there's that. So getting back to today's topic at hand, generational curses. So one of the things that I took some notes because my brain, what is a curse? All right. Ready? There's 2 ways to look at a curse. The biblical or the pagan way of viewing a curse, which is a curse or a hex that's placed on a family from an outside person or an entity. And you can believe that or you can't. It doesn't matter. Whatever your religious or spiritual ways of thinking or beliefs are. And then what I think we're going to really be talking about today is family traditions passed down through the generations that are harmful habits that define your life. So I think that's really what we're talking about. So those are the two types of curses. I know when I was kind of researching generational curses, a lot of the biblical things started coming up. And then I think that's not really a road we want to go down today, but it is something to think about too. If you're in that mindset of, you always say, well, you have Rabelais luck. You tell me, well, now you're Rabelais, you have Rabelais luck.
I say that very jokingly. That,
I know you don't mean
but for the audience,
some druid 1,000 years ago placed a hex on your family.
So I am going to attribute this to my father having said this first. And if he doesn't remember saying it to me, I distinctly remember it coming from somebody. But I can distinctly remember growing up and hearing, oh, yeah, we have Rabelais luck. It's bad or none.
Yeah.
Which was just always a way of saying, like, it always seems like if something's left to chance, it's not going to go our way. Which was also kind of a life lesson of don't leave things to chance because it's not going to turn out the way you want it to.
Yeah.
But,
so anyway, we're going to talk about family traditions that are passed down through generations that can be viewed as curses. And so my next thing was, well, what are considered family or traditional curses? And then I think, well, I have a list of 7, but I think you can really, any sort of behavior or tradition or mindset that is negative, anything that doesn't push you forward, doesn't raise you up, doesn't, it keeps you bogged down. It keeps the family bogged down. I think that's something that you can consider a generational curse. You could even look at it health-wise, things that, if if your parents smoked and now you smoke, and so your kids are going to start smoking, and none of y'all are going to have the best health, that could be a generational curse. I sound like a smoker today.
Poor eating habits leading to obesity, and
hang on. I have that. Well, okay, you talk about yours. Poor eating habits.
Should I just see myself out?
No. But I did some research. Go ahead. Poor eating habits.
Well, like if you have poor eating habits and it causes you to be obese and you pass those to your child and then they're obese because I understand that's 2024 and it's fat shaming and all this other nonsense, but you cannot argue about the horrible health effects people suffer from being morbidly obese and having tremendously high blood sugar. You can't argue that against that. I'll die on that hill.
No, I don't think anybody's arguing that point with you.
Somebody in the internet will.
Somebody will out there. So poor eating habits, and that I think that kind of goes into one of the ones that I had on here, making or allowing or making excuses for people's bad behavior and poor decisions. Oh, no, that wasn't it. Working too hard or not working at all and depending on others or the government to get by. I think that one kind of fits into that, because I have heard this before from women. I've heard it from girls I went to high school with and when I was working at Audubon. I'm really sorry about the coughing, guys. There was a couple of things that happened. One, I have heard girls say they were going to continue to have babies so that they could stay on welfare and get more money for food stamps, which, by the way, food stamps aren't paying for food. It's actually paying for, things that are considered real food. It's not real food. Food stamps only pay for the nasty, that keep you sick food. It's not really going to, anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole. And then the other one was to lie on different forms or whatever to get more money so that the government would continue to hand that money out to them. And a lot of times you would hear that when we had storms come through and you could apply for FEMA assistance and things like that. I know when, it wasn't Katrina. It was another really bad storm that came through. I can't remember which one, but it also devastated the city. And I can remember sitting,
Gustav, maybe?
I don't remember which one it was, but I can remember sitting in the lunchroom, the break room or whatever, and listening to all these women, all these girls talk about how they're saying that they did this or something, this happened to their house, or we flooded here, or now they have 6 people living in their house, when really they don't have anything that happened to their house and they don't have anyone living there, but they're filling out the forms in such a way that now they're going to get the assistance, that money from them, from the government to help them out. And so sure, someone can just be like, oh, they figured out a way to cheat the system on their own. But I would wonder how often that has happened in their family, that it's just been passed down. Like, this is what you do. You tell the government that you have this problem, or you tell so and so that you have this problem. It's an easy way out, and you just do it. And so the other thing that I wanted to, well, I'll wait for that. So anyway, so working too hard or not working at all, depending on the government to get by. Joe had something to say. Sounds
That's
like
what I
my
was trying to point out to you.
I know. Sounds like my ex-wife. And how about lie to the judge to get more child support? Yeah.
But I think the problem there is just this prevailing.
You talk. I gotta go get some water. I'm sorry.
I think the problem there is like this prevailing trend that it's okay to lie to get what you want or get what you need. Like the generational curse, whether it's levied at government or the courts or whatever else, the generational curse is teaching dishonesty, which, I mean, I coming from a household where that is not tolerated, it's troubling to me. The audience is going to have to bear with us. We have
I'm sorry.
an 80-year-old smoker in the house.
I can't stop coughing. Okay, back for the second time. I'm gonna put an old lady mint in my mouth. So back to Joe's comment. Again, he said lie to the judge
Hold
about
up.
what?
Please put that plastic down on the table.
I am.
So I can cut all this out of
Okay.
the audio.
Back to Joe's comment. Lie to the judge about getting more child support. I think, yes, that could be a family generational curse. I think that's just a generational curse, period. I think women have been told that it's okay to do that you should do that, and that it's the man's problem, because that's why you're doing it. You know, that's the man's fault. You tell that judge whatever you need to say to get your children away from that man, get the money from that man. Women have been conditioned to do that. So not only is it a family generational curse of doing that, that's just societal curse. And it's sad, and it shouldn't happen, and judges should wake up to that. That pisses me off more than anything. I had a friend who went through a divorce, and the amount of excitement that she had about taking her husband to the cleaners and what she was going to end up with and how much of a millionaire she was going to be because she was going to take his retirement and all that stuff was one of the reasons why I stopped being friends with her. So, yeah, I'm sorry. You got me on my high horse about that. So other things that I saw: divorce or relationships, or partnerships. I think you probably have the statistic buried in your head somewhere that if your parents are divorced, you're more likely to get divorced.
I don't recall the statistic off the percentage off the top of my head, but yeah, that trend holds true. Is that if your parents divorce, the likelihood that you will divorce your spouse goes up many orders of magnitude higher.
Yeah.
Like, and not only that, but like the children of divorced couples or couples that never married are many times more likely not just to get divorced, but to never rise above lower middle class economic status. They're at a much higher likelihood of going to prison. They're at a much higher likelihood of out of wedlock births. There's like this whole host of societal bad that comes along with your parents either divorcing or not being married. The fact that the family structure has been disrupted for the child, it causes all those things to go through the ceiling. Now, none of that's to say that you should stay in an abusive relationship for the sake of the kids. I'm just putting that out there that like you cannot beat the statistics involved here. So I think I've always stated that with regards to divorce, like we should probably apply pressure the opposite direction like we used to back in the day, where people were expected to kind of work it out, for the sake of the family. If a husband was being a jerk, somebody came and straightened the husband out. Usually the family of the wife would come over and be like, "Hey, why are you beating on my sister? Or why are you beating on my daughter?"
Did you think
There
that
was some-
happened?
I from having heard stories where this has happened, where like family has shown up on a man's doorstep and said, "Hey, why does my sister have a busted lip?" Yes, I can tell you 100% this used to happen. But I also think that as family bonds have been separated, as people have become more private, more secular, the bonds of community aren't there that used to enforce that kind of behavior. And it worked the other way too, because if you had a woman who was running around on a man, you better believe that woman's mother would come by and be like, "Why are you risking your marriage acting like this?"
I don't know if that happened too much. You think? I don't know.
Depends on what time period we're talking
Well,
about.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
If we're talking about when you and I grew up, no. If we're talking about early 20th century, late 19th century, 110% it did. Because there are
That's
anecdotal.
what I was thinking, but I don't know if.
Really, a lot of that fell apart in the early 20th. It started falling apart in the early 20th century when you get into the Roaring 20s and that time period. But prior to that, I mean, there are literally stories, again, anecdotal. So it's like every one of them is a survey size of one, but when they add up, it turns into more than a survey size of one. Where like, if you had a person who was the town drunk who beat his wife and kids, his boss wouldn't want him to come to work stinking a beer after beating his kids up and his wife. So it was one of those things where like the entire community said, if you're going to behave like this, we don't want you around. You wouldn't be welcome with your neighbors. And back then, because the social safety net wasn't as developed as it is now, you had to have the goodwill of your community to survive.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've also noticed that daughters will a lot of times find a man that makes them think of their father, not like in that context, but I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Like they find a man that reminds them of who their father was, or that figure in their life. And if your dad was an abusive whatever, a lot of times they're going to find, or they're going to fall down that rabbit hole back to a man like that. It's hard to find someone, I don't want to say out of your position. That's not the right way to say that, but
Well, no, but it's like you and I. It's like you and I've talked about in similar respects. Like parents become models for children. So, like Piper's model for what does a wife behave like is you. Her model for a mother is you. Her model for husband and father is me. Her model for a marriage is our marriage. And so whatever we show her is going to become her model for what's normal. And that's why generational curses tend to prevail, and that's why young girls end up looking for men that have traits in common with their father, and young boys look for traits in common with their mother, because that's their built-in model for that's who my father married. That I need there. It may not be I'm looking for a carbon copy, but there's some criteria or trait in that list that they're looking for, and they got that from modeling it on their mother.
that's what I was trying to say.
That's very, I don't know. I mean, like, if you study this kind of thing from psychological, sociological perspective, which I do because I'm just a nerd, that's pretty well baked in.
Mm-hmm.
But for that reason, like you said, if you do come from a household where mother and or father were neglectful or abusive, that is also baked into your model. And sometimes you can see it for what it is and break free from it, and sometimes you never do because that's your model.
The other one that I had, or another one that I have, is handling money handling.
Oh God.
And that one is definitely relevant to us, the two of us. And it was noticeable at the very beginning of our relationship is how to handle money.
Can I tell that story without you getting upset?
You've told it 3 or 4 times already.
Okay.
Go for it. Tell the story.
Well, I recognized very early on that like we were obviously not taught the same method of managing money, which is a polite way of saying you were not taught.
I
But
wasn't.
it came to a head because at the time you and I have always maintained separate accounts. We've always kind of like subdivided the bills roughly in proportion to how much the two of us make. And it's always been kind of an effort to say, okay, look, like you want your independence, you want to spend your money your way on what you prioritize, but we have to split the bills so that we're each carrying part of this load. And we've always done that. And at the time when we were living in the apartment, you paid the mortgage or you paid the rent. And I paid several of the other bills. It was split roughly. As a matter of fact, back then you made more than I did for a lot of years because I was still in college. But I remember you came to me hat in hand one day and said, I cannot pay the mortgage. I can't pay the rent. Like, I don't remember how short you were. I don't remember why. It doesn't matter. But you hadn't kept track of how much you had, and you were short. You could not pay the rent. And I just looked at you and said, I got the rent. I'll take care of it this month, but we need to figure out like how this happened so it doesn't happen again. And I remember how aggravated you were that I was just very nonchalant, like, yeah, I've got an extra $800 to drop on the rent, no problem. And you could not rationalize how I had paid all the other bills and had money for that.
I don't think that was why I was upset.
Oh, that was my perspective of why you were upset. Why were you upset?
I don't know. I guess I just figured that this was going to be a big blowout because money was always the point of contention and remains the point of contention for my parents. And so coming to you hat in hand saying I couldn't pay the rent that month,
You were already like
I was
bracing
already
yourself.
like bracing for a blow up, a huge blow up. It's like, okay, this makes no sense. I know it makes no sense.
Relationships rarely do.
No, you know how I get all like not upset, but I get all just kind of like frustrated at you because on the weekends you're running around here doing chores.
I have yet to have it explained to me how you having a hardworking, industrious husband who busts his butt for his family is annoying to you. You have
But
never managed to explain this to me properly, and maybe with the audience
I
watching.
know that it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense why it should. Well, it upsets me because it makes me feel like I should be doing more. And maybe
Do you want to
when,
go change the diff oil in the truck while I work on the lawn?
no, but I'll work on the lawn while you do the dip oil. I don't mind mowing the yard, but I know that it's a man thing. Anything. Anyway, money was always a point of contention. That was what the fights in our house was mostly over money because my mom would spend, my dad would want to save, but my dad spent too. And just the two of them, money is just not a
So was it maybe not the fact of who spent, but what the money was spent on, and the fact that that didn't match with the priorities of the other?
oh, now you're making it make sense for them, and that's just not how that no.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not trying to excuse away the fighting over money because I still think that's ridiculous. I'm just saying like it it could have been the fact you spent money, I wanted to spend money, but it could have also been you spent the money on this, I wanted the money so I could spend it on this instead. It doesn't matter. It's just a different perspective on things.
See, Joe gets it, or Jen gets it. I don't know, maybe Jen gets it. He said Jen is home from church and scolded me for doing Flight of the Bumblebee. I think what it is you have said in the past that the reason you do it is because you want to take care of your girls and these are the chores that need to get done, and I'm sitting on in the chair reading my book or watching a show or whatever, and you just want me to sit there and do that. But then I feel guilty because I'm not doing Flight of the Bumblebee to get things done. And so I guess one of the things, it makes me feel like I should be up doing something, but you're already doing it and you're going so fast and you're doing things. And then when I ask, how can I help you? You go, I got it, babe. I got it. And it's like, no, what else is on your list? Oh, I got this, and this. And I said, okay, well, let me do this. And you're like, okay. And it's like, wait, what? Why are you just, I don't know. Maybe I'm expecting a fight. Maybe I'm expecting.
No. Because the only time you truly get enemy is when you start in on the just sit down, just stop, we'll do it later, yada yada. That's when you and I
I do.
fight. And that is purely because my point again, differences in how we were raised quite possibly. But I was always taught get your work done first, play later. It's always work before leisure. Like if you have one thing on your to-do list, unless it is I need 5 minutes to just cool down because I just got through killing myself out in the heat, you get your butt up, you quit whining, you go get your work done. You don't goof around. And this is something you probably hear me talk to Piper about all the time because she and I go through this very frequently where she'll say, "Well, I can do that later. It only takes 5 minutes." I'm like, "Yeah, but what happens if it takes 10?"
See, maybe
Because
that's a generational curse that I'm passing down. Not maybe, I'm probably the one passing this down because I like to just sit on the weekends.
procrastination.
And I do procrastinate and I am lazy to a point. You got something to say there, babe?
You admitted it in front of witnesses.
I know I am. I don't want to get up on the weekends and when the sun rises to get my chores done so that I can just sit in my chair for the rest of the day. I want to get up and drink my cup of coffee or two or three. I want to have
Or a
breakfast
pot and a half.
or and sit there and catch up on whatever I want to catch up on, or maybe read a couple of chapters in my book
Couple of books.
or a couple of books. Those are the things that I need to do to unwind. My voice in my head just said you're going way off. You're going way off. Anyway,
That's been the last half hour though.
no, I've been keeping us up to date, up to task. Anyway, so
But the point remains that this thing you do that obviously you've taught her is this constant pit trap of, oh, that only takes 5 minutes. I can do that later because like and I especially get
true.
on, but here's the problem. I especially get on her butt about this when it's in the morning and she thinks she's done with stuff and she wants to park it on the couch. She wants to hang out. She wants to drink a half a cup of coffee because she started drinking coffee. She wants to do whatever. Mostly she wants to like scroll on the screen, but that's whatever. But as soon as she comes and asks me that, I'm like, are your shoes on? Well, that only takes a minute. I'm like, it only takes a minute until the laces are too tight and you have to unlace them or you can't find them or something happens. And now mom's walking out the door to get in the Jeep because this has happened. And you're sitting on the couch fighting with your shoes. Or you didn't pack your swim bag. Or you forgot to pack your lunch. And that's why I always tell her, I'm like, before we get to the goofing off, you have to get all the work done. Because this constant, that only takes 5 minutes, falls apart the minute something doesn't go the way you planned it to. And now, mom's trying to get out the door for work, you're holding her up because you didn't do what you should have done in the order you should have.
well, and that's why we've implemented within the last week so we have the ability to turn her phone off from our phones, which is, thank you, Apple. So it's 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, it's depending on the day, really, and what time we get home. We turn her phone off because then she actually looks up and goes, "What? What? Where am I? What's my name? Who am I?" She's probably listening, going, "That's not your mom." And then she can have it back once everything is done. Once her swim bag is packed, once her lunch is packed, once her, everything is laid out for tomorrow. That way we don't run into that problem in the morning. I know the first day we did it, I came into the living room. I'm coming in to make my coffee and breakfast. She's in the chair. Shoes are on, teeth are brushed, hair's brushed, everything's done. She's ready. And I'm like, "Are you ready to go?" And she goes, "Yeah." And everything was packed and ready to go. So she got to sit for an extra 20, 25 minutes while mom finished getting ready. Anyway.
But the point
topic.
remains, teaching your children to procrastinate or be lazy, that is 110% a generational curse. And
Yeah.
as much as I would love to live in the utopian society where you don't have to work hard to profit, I don't think I'm gonna live to see it. And the statistics say that people with a better work ethic always wind up profiting from it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no downside to teaching your children the value of hard work, teaching them responsibility, teaching them to prioritize, like needs over wants. There's no downside to that. Anybody that wants to debate that with me, line on up, but you're not going to win.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the next two bullet points that I had was the treatment of children or your children, treatment of your children or children in your family, and abuse. So I think that kind of folds into that a little bit. And when I made this bullet point, I was thinking of yes, the treatment of children and God, how many shows have we done about my childhood? Yes, but I am so sorry. The treatment of children in the family from like aunts and uncles and grandparents and things like that. I guess you could also say allowing behavior from certain people too.
110%.
Allowing or making excuses for people's bad behavior and poor decisions, not holding grown-ups, the adults in your family, accountable for their actions and the things that they say and do. You could talk about abuse in that category, physical. I don't know if I can say the other word on YouTube.
I would rather not.
Okay, because yeah, we might get flagged.
You could also change that perspective ever so slightly and say that the whole making excuses for people works up and down. Because I've seen instances where you've had like a 14, 15, 16-year-old child that is plenty old enough to understand right from wrong and plenty old enough to be expected to, within a reasonable margin, control themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people constantly make excuses for them saying, well, they're just child. And I'm like, no, they're 14, 15, 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like young men and women that age 200 years ago were starting families and going off to war. So, like, there has to be some expectation at a certain point that it's not as if at 17 years old and 364 days they're a child. We treat them like they're 2 years old, and then at 18, all of a sudden they're an adult.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of a progressive expectation of a person like maturing, and yet I see this happen where it said, "Well, they're just a child. They're just 18. They're just 20. They're just
I
this,"
do
and
that. I do
it's
that.
this constant. It's the constant moving of the goalpost to shield a person from accountability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it works the opposite direction too when they get up to a certain age and say, well, they're 60, they're 65, they're 70, they're
Right.
old, their
They're
brain, their
sick.
health.
They
And
don't
it's like,
feel, yeah.
but that's also where you and I always be myself. And I'm like, no. Either we treat them like they're an adult or we treat them like they're an invalid. Pick one and we'll go that direction. But I'm not willing, because again, I was raised this way. I'm not willing to afford a person freedom to do what they want without also laying the ultimate expectation of good behavior upon them. So if you're an adult, if you're going to spend money how you want, live how you want, if you're going to be that person that does it the way you want to do it, you get to eat the poop sandwich when it doesn't, even though it doesn't taste good, because that's accountability and freedom come linked together, come tied together.
I think that this is probably one of the biggest generational curses that families pass down. It's the lack of accountability for their family members. I know that that's true in my family, is the lack of accountability. And then the bad behavior continues. Luckily, I think it has been broken with me and my sisters. I think the lack of accountability and then the displacement of accountability, even just like the slightest displacement, has either been broken or is in the process of getting broken. I struggle with that. I struggle with making excuses for people. But then on the other hand, this last week or week before, I'm sitting at lunch with a coworker of mine, and I'm talking about my child, and I cannot remember what we were talking about, but I was telling her that Oh, it was about swim. So the kids can swim at our school. So PE class is in the fall, and in the spring it's swim. You go swimming, and it's like swim lessons. It's not just a free for all for swim. It's an actual swim curriculum. I didn't realize that. Anyway, the seventh grade girls are really not into it. They don't want to go swimming with the boys in their class. They're at an age right now where, they're all now young girls. They're all young women who have a period, and bodies are changing and things like that. And they don't feel comfortable going swimming. And we get that. Totally get that. However, it is a graded class. You still have to do it. And obviously the principal is really good about, if there's a medical issue, quote unquote, then they don't have to go swimming that week or that day or whatever. But for the most part, they're expected to dress out. And so I'm telling my friend this at work, and I'm saying, yes, I understand that that is a reason. I get that they are uncomfortable. I get that they don't want to do this. I get all of that. However, when she's an adult and her boss says, well, this is your deadline and you have to meet this deadline, and she says something like, well, I don't want to, or I'm uncomfortable with that, that's not how it's going to work in the real world. And use the phrase that we always use on this podcast: we're raising an adult. This woman that I was eating lunch with kept on with the excuses. Well, she's only 12. Well, she's only this. Well, you got to think about this. And is it really going to harm her later on in life? And I'm thinking, is it going to harm her? No. But if I don't stand firm on this, if I don't stand firm on her dressing out for PE, then she's going to continue, because this is what children do. It's not just my child. She's going to continue to push that envelope. Well, mom gave in on swimming. I don't have to dress out for swimming. Maybe I don't have to dress out this week for PE, or maybe I don't have to go to school this day because it's whatever. We can't give in. And so a lot of times I am a give them an excuse. Here's, whatever. There's always an excuse or whatever. But I'm coming around, and I have been for the last few years as being a mom, coming around to the fact of, no, there is no excuse. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Do you have to still do it? Absolutely. To a certain extent. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean,
I'm so sorry.
And again, to pivot that ever so slightly, like, that's also why I'm very big on this idea that, like, I can literally remember times talking to Piper where she has responded by saying, well, I don't like doing that. 'Cause, like, it's boring, it's whatever, it's not fun, yada, yada, yada. And I retort pretty nonchalantly with, I do things all the time that are not fun.
To do it.
I mean, look, I spend 80 hours every 2 weeks at a job that I don't particularly enjoy or care for, but it keeps a roof over your head and food in your mouth, so I'm willing to keep doing it. Like, all of it, and this isn't even like adulthood. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This isn't as if childhood is just 18 years of fun and then the rest of your life's going to suck. This is life. You're always going to have to do things that are not fun, that you don't want to do, because the penalty for not doing them is worse than the lack of fun. But again, there are families that they prioritize, and I can think of some specific families I grew up around that they prioritize fun and leisure and laziness to the point where they do only the amount of work that is 100% completely necessary, even if that means their children have to do without things. Like, I can remember families growing up around, because my family, we grew up in I don't want to say it was a poor town. It was a very lower middle class town, very working class, very blue collar. And I can remember families that, dad was always home early, or dad was taking days off work. Dad did the barest minimum amount of work. Mom didn't work. Kids were running around in a house that was filthy because mom never cleaned the house. kids' clothes were always kind of ratty and had holes in them because the family was poor because the husband wouldn't get his butt out there and do any like try to apply himself to work his butt off. And
Mm-hmm.
because come to find out when I got older and talked to my dad about it, apparently the whole family was on drugs, which didn't help any of the situation at all. But I didn't know that as a kid. I just saw that this is a family that is obviously suffering financially because dad isn't applying himself. And this is a family living in almost squalor because mom won't get her ass off the couch and clean the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I again, I I drew those comparisons between that family and my family. My dad busted his butt outside the house. My mom worked to have a clean, stable environment for me and my brother to grow up in. And I could very cleanly see there's A and there's B. And A's not working and B is. So why is, what's the difference here?
Mm-hmm.
But I see that as the same thing, like we're trying to teach our child that because it's not fun is not a justification not to do it. If it needs to get done and if it's going to better your life, you have to do it. You have
Mm-hmm.
to rise above that. And then it bleeds over into the thing I'm trying to teach her, which is get the work done before the leisure. Because if it truly is only going to take 5 minutes, then get it over with. In 5 minutes, you can go back to doing what you want to do. But this constant urge to procrastinate, put it off, to be lazy, to do it later, I'm like, the problem with that is that if you only give yourself 5 minutes to get it done, the first time it takes 6 minutes, the whole system you built falls apart. So that's why I've always hammered on her about get the work done first, get your responsibilities done first. If it really is only going to take 5 minutes, then in 5 minutes you'll be done. But if it takes half an hour, you just prove my point that you didn't allocate the right amount of time to do it, and it wouldn't have gotten done if you'd done it your way.
Yeah.
Like I've told her, every time mom walks out to the Jeep and you're not ready to walk out right behind her or right in front of her, you prove my point that your way is not working.
The last one on my list before we move on to the last little bit.
Your adopted son is on. Morning, Eddie.
Oh, I talked about you earlier. You weren't here. Shows how much you love me. I'm joking. I did talk about you earlier. You'll have to go back and listen or text me. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to say was not educating your children, and that being a generational curse. Not educating your children as in like sending them to school, yes, but not educating your children in
Life
how to
skills.
be an adult. Yeah. So just like what we were talking about, how not educating them that they have to go to work and they have to bring home a paycheck and they have to take care of themselves. Or for instance, yesterday, Piper comes out of her room. She's going to kill me with how much I'm talking about her today. Piper comes out of her room and she goes, Dad needs to do laundry. And I looked at her and I said, time out.
What was
Why
the
does Dad need to do laundry? I said, do you need something washed? And she goes, yeah. And I said, get your stuff. Go to the laundry room. I'm going to teach you how to do your laundry.
and just as a point of context, at the moment this all happened, I was underneath the hood of the truck yanking spark plugs out of a head. So like I was doing something that neither one of them knew how to do. And yeah, Dad could have done laundry afterwards. But I appreciate the fact that you were kind of like, pump the brakes. Dad's working on stuff we don't know how to do. We can do this.
Yeah. So anyway, taught her a life skill. And what I might do is put the notes, write down the notes and tape it to the washing machine so that she remembers how to wash her own clothes. So like, she's a girl, she's a teenage girl. And of course, I'm finding clothes in there that she just tried on.
She likes to wear 3 outfits a day.
She could have just hung it back up instead of throwing it in dirty clothes.
I'm not going to say who might have taught her some of that.
I don't do that. Change clothes 3 times a day. I don't have the energy.
No, I mean, try on 3 outfits looking for the perfect one.
Oh, yes, but I don't throw it in the dirty clothes once
No,
I just
you
try
hang
it
it
on.
back up.
Anyway, so we had a little life lesson teaching her how to do her own laundry. She knows how to cook some things and she knows how to clean the kitchen and all that stuff. She knows how to sweep the floors, all that. So not educating your kids on how to be an adult. But I think it and this is not an excuse. If your parents weren't taught those things, then how are they going to teach their children? But this is kind of where I start to kind of wrap this up and get into, well, how do we break these generational curses? Well, first we have to wake up to them. We have to realize that this is a curse. This isn't getting my family anywhere. You have to take a step back and look at your family and be like, Grandma and Papa do this, Mom and Dad do this, and me and my siblings do this. And none of this is healthy. None of this is forward progress for our family. None of this is getting us where we want to be. You have to be able to wake up to those things.
Which is often the most difficult
That is the hardest part, is taking a step back and looking at it in a different lens and going, maybe I should stop this.
I will say, though, that, like, specific to you, I think what saved you was moving 5 hours away to go to college, by having that buffer and being able to kind of like disconnect and figure out your way of doing things. Because I know my father's commented the same thing, was that it wasn't until he moved about 5 hours away from Southeast Texas to Southeast Louisiana that he was able to look at some habits of his family very objectively and say, God, why are they like that? Like, that was he could not have that wake up call while he was, like 5 minutes across town from mom and dad, and when he was an hour away from all of his brothers and sisters. But with that disconnect came the ability to view things differently. But the thing that, because I see Eddie continuing to comment, and I'm reading it, but we're in the middle of something. But like, one of the things I've commented about to Eddie and to several other people, Stuart being one of them, friends of ours through the podcast who don't have children themselves, is I've commented, I'm like, bear in mind that there are other ways to mentor than having your own children. Like, if you know a child that lives in your neighborhood or lives in your community who doesn't have that father figure, or that you see the ability to interject yourselves in their lives with someone with some amount of permission to be a positive influence in their life, like, that is also an opportunity to mentor them and maybe help them break those generational curses.
Yeah.
Because if the only way you ever know is the only way you've ever known, you don't have that thing that I had where I could compare and contrast the way my family lived to the way other families lived. And I could see, okay, this is definitely the way to do things because it's working better. But if you don't have that A-B comparison point, you can't ever get to that point.
I think, though, and maybe since the therapist is here, he can kind of back me up. I think at some point in every person's life, they're able to compare and contrast themselves to another person or a family and say, well, why do they have that? Why does so-and-so have the nicer house or the nicer car, or they're able to go on trips, or, and then but I think the problem is they are born in a rut and then they stay stuck in the rut and they don't know how to get themselves out of the rut. They don't realize that it's a rut. And maybe having that aha moment of saying, well, Sally's family is like this. Why can't we be like this? Knowing that there's always something behind the scenes that other people don't see. But I think people do get that. I think most people are able to look at other families or other people and say, so-and-so lives like this, but we live like this. And why? Why is that there? Why is it like that?
But the difference is a lot of people will attribute that to something outside of their control, rather than saying the difference between me and them is something within my control that I could change for myself. That's the hard part. To me, once you get past recognizing a generational curse, the next hardest thing to do is to actually take ownership of it. Because for a lot of people,
that's what I'm trying to say,
Okay.
but you're doing better at it.
I'm wording
You
better.
always do it better.
You're really good at leading the conversation, and then I word it.
Thank you. NyQuil has not been my friend this week.
Oh, the green,
has, but
her and the Green Fairy have had a very intimate relationship the last several days.
anyway, go for it.
But I think taking ownership of those generational curses is incredibly difficult because it lays bare at your feet the fact that you are the one screwing up your own life. And that's a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow, is to say something going on here is within my control and it would be better if I would make it better. So the reason it's not better is because of me. But once you overcome that emotional hurdle, like the whole conversation we had earlier about Stuart, we are not starting over, and Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Are we in a different time zone? Why
I'm
are y'all
starting.
all so late?
I'm starting to think that our clocks got set forward an hour, honestly, but I don't think so. But I truly believe that, like,
Yes,
yes,
broken people raising broken
it is
people.
broken people
Hello,
raising
that's
broken
me.
people. But again, and again, as we've been taught, since I've said it quite a few times, the way I was raised was that, no one is responsible for your outcome but you. You don't get to blame it on luck. You don't get to blame it on chance. You don't get to blame it on someone else. Like when I was growing up, the answer always was, did you work as hard as you could have? And if I told my dad I held back even 1%, that's the reason you failed.
Okay, and Rachel actually put my words into better words too. And she said, I think it's because they are stuck in their own ways. Some people can't figure out how to change. That's what I think. I think they get comfortable. Maybe they don't know any better. Maybe there's some reason why, besides just because it's hard work to break generational curses. Trust me, I am living that right now. I am living the whole breaking the curse. And I have been ever since I became a mom. It is hard, but if you don't know that you're not in a rut, or if you are in a curse, then how are you going to change it? And yes, like I just said, you can see what other people are doing and you can say whatever, but if you're comfortable in that, you wouldn't change it. You won't change it because that's all you've known, that's all you've ever known, and it's not comfortable to change that.
Yeah, and for some people that's emotional comfort. It's like, again,
Right, you don't know any better. That's what
but it's not
Amy
just
just
they
said.
don't know any better. But what I'm saying by emotional comfort is what I was saying earlier about how for some people they will truly say, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with this," because the alternative is to admit you're screwing up. You remember the conversation you and I had sideways to this about we used to have a friend who was constantly on you about why is Phil doing that? Why is Phil prepping? Crazy prepper, stupid, yada yada yada. And you
Who
asked
was
me,
that? Are we still friends?
we're not.
Okay.
But you asked me, and I think you asked me out of exasperation, and I took it as a genuine question because it's me. But you asked me like, why is she like that? And I'm like, because if she admitted for 1 second that what I was doing made sense, she would have to admit that her not doing it doesn't make sense. So it's better for her to demean this whole thing than for her to admit she's screwing up. And I think that applies here. I think for a lot of people out there, they will internally recognize a generational curse, but they'll either excuse it away saying I can't fix it. Like how many times have you heard people who are woefully overweight who will say I'm just big boned, or and now I'm not saying that there are not medical conditions that make it incredibly difficult to lose weight. They exist. I get that, but y'all don't all have thyroid problems. Some of y'all just can't put the fork down. So let's
I
be
mean,
honest.
that's a whole other.
But let's be honest that you can't explain away 100% of a problem with
No,
a tiny population.
no,
But
I agree.
there are people who will use an excuse because the alternative is to admit I'm doing this to myself and I just don't want to I don't want to put in the effort to stop doing it. Or for a person who is constantly like come payday, they are at negative whatever in their checking account because they can't control their spending. They will make excuses of the cost of living and the cost of groceries and my boss doesn't pay me enough, and they will make all these excuses before they ever admit I shouldn't have gone to the bar last night and run up $200 on my bar tab, or I shouldn't have spent my money on that, or I shouldn't have I shouldn't have this credit card at 30% interest with all this balance sitting on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those situations where understand, like for the audience, when I give these analogies, I'm not saying that this applies to 100% of people, and there are not people out there that are genuinely having a bad time, or there's something stacking the deck against them. But I am saying that there are people who don't have the deck stacked against them by anything other than themselves.
Yeah.
But they will not admit it because it then forces them to take responsibility for it. And some people are allergic to accountability.
I don't. I think I said this earlier. I think accountability and holding people accountable is probably the like root cause of most of this. Is that, well, besides people being stuck in a rut and not knowing that they're actually stuck in a rut, but if you do have that aha moment of wow, this really isn't healthy to be doing this, mentally healthy or even physically healthy, this isn't healthy, then you can't, and this is where it gets hard for me because I haven't held my parents accountable for so long. Is actually saying, time out, wait a second. This is not going to continue. Your behavior is not it's not acceptable and it has to stop. And like Eddie just said to one of his clients, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'm there. I'm there. It's not we're not in a fun stage of breaking a generational curse right now for me, or holding people accountable. And it is going to get worse. I think it's still going to get worse than before it gets better because this is I don't know. It's me going at 40 years old, time out. Your behavior is not healthy. And it's affecting me in an unhealthy way as well. And I refuse to, one, bring my family into it, but two, continue that in my family. I expect, I've said this, my sisters have said this, I expect you to hold me accountable. And you do, you always have. I think that's one of the reasons why we clash so much in the beginning of our relationship is because you held me accountable for my spending. You held me accountable for hitting you. You held me accountable for everything that I was doing that was a generational curse. When I said abuse, I meant either physical or mental abuse. I did those things. And it wasn't easy, but it also started me down a path of going, wait a second, I don't need to do that. I shouldn't do that to you. I shouldn't spend the money like this. I shouldn't hit you just playing or anything like that. Okay. So thank you for that, for holding me accountable. But that's the hard part, at least for me, is holding people accountable. And then because I don't like confrontation, I have to stay firm in that accountability. So I've been no contact with my parents for a while, right? Yeah. Well, my
Barring,
mother,
barring some like,
an emergency.
yeah, barring well checks on for their physical well-being, yes.
Well, yeah, there was a
you have,
physical thing, that emergency that happened, and that's when I broke the no contact.
and I'm not discounting that. I'm just adding context because for some people when they say no contact, it means I'll see you at your funeral.
Well, yes, and that's not what I mean.
That's why I add the context.
Right. But I have been no contact with my mom. Anyway, that's I guess it is relevant to the conversation because it is holding people accountable for their actions, not allowing them to continue those actions and taking whatever means necessary to do that. And that's the getting worse before it gets better. Maybe it'll get better. I don't know. Probably not. Just like Rachel said, they are stuck in their ways.
I do.
Sorry.
Well, but I, when you say it'll never get better, I disagree only because I think it depends on where your goalpost is. Like for me, it's never going to get better in the fact that they are going to get better, they're going to change. If that's your goal, I'm not saying it is, but if that's your goalpost, it will never get better. It's not going to. But I do think it can get better in the fact that like, I do feel like it can become easier over time for you to defend your goalpost. You know what I'm saying? I think that over time, you will become more comfortable defending yourself and more comfortable extricating yourself from the conversations and the situations when you shouldn't be there. I do think that will get easier over time. I don't think it will ever get easier because of any action of theirs. I think it'll get easier because of the actions you're taking.
I will become more comfortable with breaking away.
Over almost 20 years of us being together, which this coming February makes 20 years. And then you and I have been together since I came home from Iraq.
Wow.
We're
old.
But over almost 20 years of being together at this point, I have always expected accountability from you because there was no version of reality where we were going to get married if I couldn't expect you to be accountable for your end of things. Like that was again, we talked about non-negotiables and we talked about on this show. That was a non-negotiable for me. We are going to be accountable to each other for everything. But I feel like me holding you accountable and you holding yourself accountable has gotten a hell of a lot easier over the last 20 years. There are very few times where you and I have to like go head to head anymore and say and have like a major fundamental disagreement over money spending. Usually I'm the one who's the spendthrift and you're the one saying, "Phil, you've got the money. Go get what you want." But my point is like how many times have you had to come to me with your hat in your hand and say I can't pay the bills in the last 15 years?
I don't know.
I don't think it's happened.
That's nice.
Well, but
I was thinking you were going to say, yeah, like 5 times.
no, but that's
like she hasn't learned her lesson.
but I guess that's my point is that accountability was a very hard thing for the two of us to overcome in early on in our relationship because lack of accountability was a generational curse. But over the past, that was like the first couple of years together, or maybe the first year we were married. But over the years we've been together since, it has been a non-issue.
Yeah.
So I feel like things become habit forming, and I feel like as you commit yourself to this road of breaking these generational curses, as you commit yourself to that path of self improvement, or not even self improvement according to society standards, but really just getting to like your perfect version of yourself. You know, it's like when you and I got really serious about getting our health under control. We were both overweight. We were both eating like CRAP. Neither one of us was doing right by ourselves. And we decided we need to make some changes. My blood sugar has been so much better managed since then. It's been 110% worth it to me. My perfect version of myself, even though I understand that as long as I do the walking and I do the eating right, my weight will come down. But my perfect version of myself isn't a Calvin Klein underwear model. I couldn't care. It's not, but it was never a goal of mine.
Right.
My goal was to be more physically active and more physically capable than the average 41, 42-year-old man, which I think I am. My goal was to not have to, embrace hypoglycemia and prediabetes. My goal was to stay off insulin and well into my older age. Those were my goals. My goal is to maintain my health for as long as I can. And I feel like I'm accomplishing that. So I guess I'm saying is like, if you have a generational curse, it has to be something that you recognize is bad for you or is holding you back from attaining your goals. And then it has to be something you're willing to take responsibility for and put in the work to break that curse so that you can become your better version of you.
I like that.
I think that's always the goal, though. I mean, even outside the realm of generational curses, like we should all want to be better. We should all want to be a better version of ourselves. You should never want to be your neighbor. You should never want to be a celebrity or a sports figure, but you should want to be the best version of you.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds so hippy dippy, even coming out of my mouth, but I believe it.
Well, I'm glad you believe it.
Well, it's the way I see things. But as far as generational curses, like I think you've done tremendous work to try to break your own generational curses. I don't feel like I carried a lot of them, if any, into this marriage. No. But I will say, I will say that I feel like my father broke a lot of generational curses before he got to me, which is probably why I didn't carry them into this relationship, because he had done the work you're doing now of saying, this is the way I was taught. I don't think that works. This is the way I'm going to do things. So by the time I came along, the way I was taught was the product of his adult life, unlearning and relearning things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you have to throw your mom in there too.
True.
I did that as a team.
I don't mean
Just
to leave
like
my
we
mom,
do.
and I don't mean to leave my mom out, but like a lot of times I talk about my father because it's that whole what's my model for husband father?
Yeah.
It's dad.
Yeah. Okay. Good show.
Good show, old man.
All right, guys. Well, thank y'all for joining us today. And sorry to the ones who I was like, where are y'all? Yeah, anyway. I hope y'all have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next week. Next week's going to be our last show before prepper camp. And then we get to go see all of our family up in North Carolina. And I'm so excited to see you all. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see y'all later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.